Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, we have a couple people on here. Just gonna wait a few minutes. All right, you guys, this is the first time I've ever done an Instagram live, so just bear with me. I've done them on other people's platforms, but not on mine. And I drank a cup of coffee and cut my toe, and so I'm all frazzled, but I'm ready. I'm really excited to talk to Aisha Barenblatt from Remake, and she's going to talk us through Pay Up and what's currently happening with Pay Up. And since COVID, the world has sort of turned upside down, and a lot has been revealed. I don't know if you all feel that way, but I certainly do. And there's a lot of things that have been happening that are not necessarily fair or just. And I don't know if you know this, but some of your favorite brands, fashion brands, and maybe some of mine, have not been doing the right thing. They haven't been paying their workers. And so Aisha is going to talk to us about Pay Up and what it means to get these garment workers paid properly, and tell us all about the work that she's doing. So, hi everybody. Oh, Aisha's coming. Let's see. Here we go. I had to tape my phone on my wall because I don't have that thing. Hi, Aisha.
Hi, Amber. I'm glad you had your cup of coffee, and thank you for inviting me. We did it. The technology worked.
I know. I mean, you got to bear with me. I am like so technically challenged.
Me too. You and me both.
Okay, good. And then I'm also nervous because I've never done this before on mine. I've been on someone else's, but I've never done it on mine. So I'm like, I don't even know. It's so counterintuitive to talk to the camera.
Of how we connect, right? I wish I could just hug you and have a conversation over a cup of coffee, but this is what we have right now. Yeah.
I know. It's true. It's true. So how are you?
I'm okay. It has been a difficult couple of weeks. I mean, who knows that we would find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic, the fashion industry in a free fall, our country finally contending with its racial history of injustice, and it's all sort of come together, But it's conversations like this, I think, that really keep me going to say, we can and we will, as a collective of women particularly, make a difference. How are you? How are you holding out?
I'm well. I just, I think it's an interesting time. It's a lot of unlearning. It's a lot of educating. It's a lot of resetting. I've been sad, and I think that's really normal. I've had a lot of grief, like a lot of people. And more recently, because I think I knew the systems weren't working. And I knew culturally, there was a lot happening, but I think I thought we were further along in some ways. And I don't know, it's been heartbreaking, but it's also been very hopeful. I feel grateful to be able to take action and have conversations like this with you, and feel like we've been given an opportunity to speak out now, and now is such an appropriate time to just call out what is, and reframe the way we think, reframe the way we do business, and maybe set us on a much higher level of living for everyone on the planet.
Right, because the system for too long is working for a few and not for many.
Exactly.
And I really do draw hope from, COVID-19 has cracked wide open how the fashion system, but also capitalism at large, it's not working for a lot of people. And can we use this as a teachable moment,
That's right.
to rise from the ashes and make it better,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Would you tell everybody, because there's probably a lot of people who actually don't know about Remake and then Pay Up, and just kind of give a brief summary about that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting me first ever on your
Of course.
IGTV. So Remake is a nonprofit based here in California. We are an advocacy-based organization that's for women and by women. And what we are really focused on is how do we make fashion a force for good? We do this very practically in two ways. The first is with transparency. You know, I think often for those of us who look at the glitz and glamour of fashion on runways, don't really see the underbelly of just waste. If you've never been to a landfill, you don't understand the waste. If you've never been to a factory, you don't understand how it's oppressive to women. And so, you know, part of our Maiden series is focused on just that, is getting people to really connect with the frontline communities that are most impacted by fashion. And I know, Amber, you and I were just in the midst of talking about having you come on a maiden journey. You know, we're planning to go to Ethiopia, which is a big hotspot when it comes to fashion production. And then, of course, COVID happened. But, you know, transparency is the first thing that we do. And the second is really a lot of education and leadership development. You know, within our community, we have models like yourself, activists, creatives, designers, so insiders in the fashion industry, but also everyday shoppers who are saying, how can we educate ourselves, use our platform as you are, to really be putting climate justice and women's empowerment in the very center of fashion. So that's who we are. You know, you can find more on our Instagram, Remake Our World. But really, it's a solidarity of women like you and I coming together to say we know that we have to rebuild. And, you know, Pay Up is exactly that. It's a recognition that so much of the fashion industry pushes all of the risk onto the people that make our clothes. And, you know, here we are in June, and we're still waiting from a growing number of brands to just pay up. And people ask, well, what do you mean pay up? It's like, well, pay for work that has already been done, labels that have already been made for you in March and April. And as we're walking into the summer, we're hearing from the women who are predominantly Black and brown in the fashion supply chain that are increasingly food insecure and housing insecure. And so that's really what, you know, drove that hashtag, which at this point, thanks to you being one of the first, has become viral and done a good job in holding companies accountable.
How much have you reaped back for workers abroad? How much have you gotten back from companies that got to Pay Up?
Yeah, so, and I think this is for people listening in to know how much, you know, activism does matter. At this point, as of yesterday, we now have 17 brands who have committed. And we know from talking to suppliers and work organizations, we've recouped $7.5 billion in global orders. Yes, and so
that's amazing.
It's all of us as a collective, and that's meant, you know, 600 million directly in Bangladesh, 7.5 billion globally. And for workers in Ethiopia and Haiti, where the situation is becoming more and more dire, you know, every brand that pays means that that's directly money for her to be out of debt, to be able to buy groceries. And so that matters, you know.
It does matter.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, what motivated you to be the first to use your platform to say, yes, pay up? You know, I was just so heartened because there was a ripple effect with other influencers saying, if Amber Valletta can do it, we can do it too.
Well, we're not done.
No, we're not done.
I believe in social justice, and I believe in equality, and I feel in the last 15 years since I've been working in environmental justice, I see the intersection of the two, and you can't have one without the other. You have to have environmental justice and social justice, and they are together. And I've realized that, you know, I'm very blessed to have the work that I have within the fashion industry, but the inequality is so great. The discrepancy between the top of the supply chain, the consumer, and people making the clothes, and people like me selling the clothes, it's just, we're like worlds apart. And I can't do it like that anymore. It's also, we're worlds apart with how we're treating the environment, and I just can't do it anymore. I can't sell you things that I don't believe in, and that I don't believe are okay for you, and that somebody who was creating it or making it wasn't treated fairly or paid fairly. It is too much. It's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what motivated me. It's just that we need to all have a fair opportunity, and the playing field needs to be leveled out. It's not fair right now.
It is.
And I think that I've realized, especially during COVID, before sort of the social justice kind of change at the moment, I was already thinking so many things are not working, so many things are not fair, so many things are not real. They're created by us. They're manufactured ideas to keep people in place and systems working for people that are only, there's a few people it's working for, and the rest it's not working for. And that's goes with economics, social equality, to climate and or environmental justice. And so I just think
the
now
intersectionality is so important. I think for too long, the environmental conversation and the social justice conversation has happened separately, and it's not completely linked. You talk about
completely linked.
All of these orders that have been canceled, and you were asking me this question, well, where's all the product? And
yes.
I think for people, there's millions and millions of units of products sitting in warehouses, which, by the way, brands are requiring their suppliers who are near bankruptcy to pay the storage fees. It's sitting on docks. Some of it is unclaimed. I've seen photos in factories of just stacks and stacks of jeans and tops, which is becoming a fire hazard in these factories. And it's to say, well, what's to become of all of these clothes, and a lot of it will end up being burnt or destroyed, which makes my heart hurt if you think about
what a waste.
the resource implications, and then for us sitting at home, I think we've had a reset, right, with our closets to say, well, how much do we actually need? How many seasons? How many sales, can we do with some of the things already in our closet? But it's the same workers who are on the front lines when it comes to climate. Think about the workers in Bangladesh. They just had a cyclone. They're dealing with weather patterns. Are the exact same people now protesting on the street to say, on an average, I make $96 a month. I'm still waiting and getting about half that salary. I'm taking on debt to buy one bag of rice to share with multiple family members. And this is what it's come down to, where you have multi-billion fashion supply chains and brands just shoring up their own balance sheet at the expense of workers to say, well, orders are down, so we just won't take the product, and it's just cracked all of that inequity wide open.
Yeah. It's very disturbing. I mean, I read some stuff about some of these brands not being able to pay or saying they can't pay, and then they're posting about Black Lives Matter, or they're saying they can't pay, and then they pay their shareholders, millions of dollars. And it's just so wrong. It's so wrong. You cannot talk about something and not practice it. You can't say Black Lives Matter and Brown Lives Matter and then not pay your workers. Right. It's just not fair.
It's just, and
it's a lie.
I think that, all of us, and so many of these conversations moving online has become so powerful. It's to say the show us or shut up, that campaign to say, well, unless you can show me photos of your executive team and your leadership team, unless you give us the reports on transparently how many Black employees you have, is it at least 15% because that's the population, then you can't stand for Black Lives Matter. And, it's similarly to say a lot of brands talking about equality, and then it's to say, well, equality for who?
Exactly.
You've just seen Kohl's and JCPenney, some of these brands where it's like, I'm paying the shareholders, then, I'm declaring bankruptcy so I get a clean start. Meanwhile, my suppliers are still waiting for product that has already been made and in many instances shipped since March. So if you don't stand for warehouse workers and retail workers and garment workers, you don't stand for equality, and that's where the solidarity, I think, from model to garment maker has been so wonderful to say, we have to rebuild, So you tell me, Amber, when you think of the future of the industry, what do you see or what do you hope? Like if we were to dream for a second to say, okay, we know it's not working. What's the future?
I mean, in my hopeful opinion
Yeah.
is that the future of fashion is a completely circular industry, that we do not take any more natural resources than we use, and we use exactly what we've already created to break down and build new, that the supply chain is fair and equitable, and that, you know, environmental justice and social justice are at the top of everybody's minds. It's the lens in which you work through, and creativity and innovation are part of that, but that is really the lens in which you use to build a business, to operate. It shouldn't be just about profit. I think that is the thing that we have been missing, that has been amiss so much. There's so much greed, and it's out of balance.
Mhm.
And so people and planet is my hope, that it comes first. And it's not a hippy dippy thing. It's
Yeah.
really practical.
Mhm.
It's really if everybody is thriving, then the planet is better, is healthier. We have more diversity. We have an ecosystem that works. And right now we have a very sick global ecosystem.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's a sickness, you know, and I think
Yeah.
you've pinpointed on, you know, all of the elements that are not working. And in some ways, I think sustainability has become such an overused marketing term that I'm
Yeah.
almost calling on the industry to say, okay, let's just
Yeah.
stop talking about sustainability
Yeah.
because it's almost meaningless, you know,
Yeah.
how much marketing has essentially co-opted it. And I think one way to think about is this really in terms of resilience of supply
Yes.
chain systems, and the fact that, you know, this will not be our last pandemic. Unfortunately,
No.
there's too many people on the planet. We're rubbing up against ecological boundaries. You know, climate shocks are here and in the future. And so for a lot of brands who are worried about product shipping on time and thinking about their sales cycle, it is about better production planning. It's
Absolutely.
about having closer relationships with your suppliers and your worker communities. It's about what can you bring home, and we can't bring everything home, but, you know, smaller consolidated supply chain also means fewer seasons. We can't just be throwing product out there, most
No.
of which ends up burnt or in a landfill anyway.
That's right.
Because we're borrowing against our children's future from an ecological perspective every time we're putting out millions of units of garment and seeing what sells.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And for someone who is just coming into this conversation with us, you know, how can you put it very simply for them when we're talking about, you know, these inequalities and the lack? I think a lot of people have a lack of understanding of garment workers and what it means to be someone who is making your clothing for very little. Can you kind of just give it very layman terms, like you said, you were talking about how much they get paid, the living standards, the working standards, like explain to someone who is just kind of coming into this what it means when they go buy a t-shirt at a fast fashion place, or even something that's not considered fast fashion.
Right, right. Because even sometimes the luxury brands don't necessarily treat their artisans.
No, but I think
You know?
I think there's people, you know, it's like almost like magic elves make their clothing or something.
I
And
can't tell you how many
want
times
you to-
I'm in a college and people are like, you mean robots don't make our clothes? That's literally the perception.
I know, and I would love for you to kind of paint a picture of what the reality is, because I know I've studied up on it. I know I've seen footage. I've seen it, but I don't know if a lot of people understand when we're talking about this, really what it looks like and what it means to have your clothes, like describe so people know what it is and who makes their clothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for people to first of all understand, you know, I think we sometimes think of fashion as a creative outlet, something wonderful and joyful, and it should be all these things. But it's to say, if you care about climate justice and you care about women's empowerment, there's so much we can do as our role as activists and consumers through the lens of fashion. You know, this is a predominantly female workforce, which is unusual compared to other manufacturing industries.
How many, would you also tell the number of like
Yes.
the global garment workers, and then the percentage of women? Because that is astounding.
Yeah, so if we looked all the way to the commodity levels of thinking up to cotton, we know there's about 120 million people that are involved in the fashion supply chain. Just when we look at cut and sew, which is just the people who make our cut and stitch our product, 75 million people do that, and over 80% are women. The other thing to know is that most of them are very young women. So she is in her early 20s. She has left her safety of her village to come into the big bad world of cities. Essentially, she's a sacrificial child who is keeping her brothers or her sons in college, in
Sending
school,
money home.
sending money home. And in very many ways, she's a feminist in her own right. I think often the Western media paints her as a victim, which is why our Made in docuseries is really about making her the hero of the story, to say she's the backbone of the fashion industry. A lot of the women that we've met from Cambodia to Mexico, they're organizing by themselves, they're learning their rights, they're grappling oftentimes as they reach marriageable age, not just in working a 10, 12-hour factory day, but making sure that they're able to care for their families so that they can lift that generation. I remember once when we were filming in Cambodia, one of the workers shared with us how she is sacrificing her life so that her daughter can stay in school. And so that's really the question that comes to our mind when we think about living wages, which really the industry doesn't pay right now, is that by keeping her in a cycle of poverty, we're essentially trapping a generation of women in poverty, and so every time we want something very fast, I want people to think about that means she has to work a 10, 12-hour day and really worry about violence as she's walking home in the dark. Every time we want something cheap, she's finding that everything around her is becoming expensive and that she's having to take on debt or being trafficked on the side just to pay for food. And so in the context of COVID, all of this has become full circle, where the crisis is really heightened. A lot of workers that we're hearing from in Dhaka and in Haiti and in Ethiopia, they're stuck in these urban centers, right? When the shelter in place happened, a lot of them didn't have money to pay for transportation to even get back home. They were protesting on the streets for wages and taking on debt. We've heard from organizers about worrying about these women becoming trafficked. And now that the factories have opened because the stores have slowly started to open, she's starting to get sick. And so I think if we start to think of the human hands and the fact that it's predominantly young women who make our clothes rather than the magical elf, to your point, I hope it has us look at our closet with a different kind of empathy and connection. All of her hopes and dreams are connected to our clothes. And so we really do have power in asking the industry to not forget about her in this crisis.
Yes, because they say they're for us. They say they're for women. They say they're for the Black and brown community. They say they're for us. So we need to make sure that we hold them accountable.
And I see there's some comments within here that are anxious to say, well, what can we do? What can we do? And I think there are some very practical and actionable things that you all can do right now. The first is to sign our petition. As of yesterday, Amber, I was looking, when we started, we had a couple of hundred people. 100,000 people have signed the petition. And people might ask, well, what does a petition do? Well, the thing to know is that the petition is tied to all of the executives, the CFOs, the CEOs who are on the non-paying up side of our tracker. And so we are writing to them weekly. We are creating a lot of reputational damage through social media and press. And then on the back end, there are conversations happening where we started with 2 brands. At this point, we're 17 brands that have paid up. So just know that that one simple signature goes a long way. The second thing for people to do, and in the kindest possible way, is to just tag your favorite brands and say, hey, I'm learning that a lot of workers are starving, that they are hungry. Have you paid up? The hashtag pay up, it's viral at this point. And for a lot of companies where stores are slowly opening, but they're relying on e-commerce, this is the time where the online reputation really matters. And so for them to hear from all of you directly as their customers is to say, look, have you paid up? Yes or no? I would like to buy something for the summer and fall, but I want to know if workers have been paid. So those are 2 very actionable things. And then, I'd love to hear from you, Amber, as you think about, your role, not just as a model or someone who sells a fashion, but in building a conscious closet. Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, for me, I don't buy very much. I know that sounds odd, but I actually don't buy very much. I try to buy very consciously when I do purchase something. Like the t-shirt I have on right now is by a company called 4 Days, and it's a totally circular company here in LA. And I try to take care of what I have and appreciate what I have and reuse and revamp. I like to,
I
cut
like
jeans,
that.
cut jeans off, or cut t-shirts, or tie-dye t-shirts. And then I'm also very cognizant of the brands that I buy, and sometimes I even have to do research and find out, I thought this one was doing the right thing, or oh my gosh, I didn't have any clue that this company was actually using new technologies to be more clean and sustainable, or that their supply chain was transparent. And so it's about educating too. I still have to educate myself all the time, and stay aware. And also, I check with my clients what they're doing. When I get hired for a job, I specifically ask, especially right now, have you paid? Have you
Which
paid?
is so powerful. If you could say more about that, I think it's incredible. It's one thing to come from an activist like myself to say pay up, but it's another thing if Amber Valletta says, look, I'll do this job, but have you paid? That's enormous.
Yeah, I had haven't had any work, but I recently got an opportunity to have some pictures reused by Zara, and they were old pictures from like the 90s, and I wasn't sure what the situation was with pay up with them, because they are part of a group of quick suppliers, fast suppliers. So I actually reached out to you, and I asked the question, are they on the right side of this issue? Because I don't want to take this job. I'm willing to sacrifice getting paid, because I just can't do it anymore. I cannot take money from people who are not doing the right thing. And I know it's not always perfect, but there has to be some steps to progress rather than, nothing. And so when you said that they were actually on the right side of this issue, I was able to gladly say yes. And I just want you to know that I'm going to give you a donation from this check for $10,000. I'm going to give you guys $10,000 from my pay.
Thank you so much.
So I just want you to know that.
I can hear my team squealing in the background. Actually, the work is not glamorous, and you should know that every dollar that we raise, it directly goes back to the Pay Up campaign and holding more brands accountable. But that's just such a beautiful story in terms of, then people within Zara to hear, gosh, not only did we do the right thing by paying up, but, this has deepened our relationship with Amber, and that like Amber will only work with us if we do it right. And so for the brands on the wrong side of the tracker to take note, and so I think for people listening in, it's to say, there's the short-term urgent work of what we're all doing, and then there's a long-term. And in the short term, it is things like signing the petition, asking brands whether or not they are paying up. So someone in the chat said, and we have to get SB 1399 passed, and which is absolutely right. So for those who aren't familiar, SB 1399 is legislation that we're trying to pass here in California.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, and it's really important because, a lot of brands in Los Angeles, which is 50,000 workers in LA, mostly of mixed immigration status, are a piece rate. And they make a subhuman wage. Even making our masks right now, as production has shifted, are making it for a few cents without having proper protective gear themselves. And the reason is there's a loophole in the law, which currently allows brands to go through contractors, and then for contractors to then pay piece rate. And so, it's on the Senate floor today, actually. And so I think regulation is going to be really important, because often people think, oh, if it's made in the USA, then it's all good.
Which is not true.
It's not. If you want to find sweatshops right here at home, You know,
That's
you
what
can go
I've
to
heard.
Santee LA. And again, it's, you know, big brands with celebrities behind them that are often endorsing without having an understanding that workers are making sometimes, you know, $3, $4 for piece rate. So I think it's for people listening to say, yes, sign the petition, tag the brands, you know, let's get SB 1399 passed. And then it's to say, as we're looking to the future, this really has been a reset moment, right? So some of us in our community, including actress Nat Kelly, are taking a no new clothes for 90 days pledge. Partly it's to say, just thinking about, you know, what is essential. And it takes 90 days for us to change our relationships and habits with anything. And so it's taking stock of what we have. COVID has certainly taught us that perhaps we don't need as much. You know, I was reading somewhere people are buying more tops but no bottoms because no one's wearing bottoms. But the idea is to go to, you know, your ethos of buying less, buying better, buying sustainable, which is another way for consumers to do our part, you know. And so I think there's many ways for us to just know how much our voice matters right now. And customers are powerful when we come together as a collective. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a lot of work to do. I want to work with you more here locally in California, so you have to let me know how I can help, because I think it starts at home, right?
It does. It does. So often we're thinking about these issues are far away, but really what we've seen is there's this solidarity that we're needing across all of us, thinking about workers, you know, and there's what's happening with garment workers in LA. It's also thinking about warehouse workers. You know, we've even been having DMs from retail workers as we've been calling out brands to say, you know, these same brands who are not paying up, by the way, they're also really racist when it comes to how they treat us as storefront employees, you know. And so you've seen anthropologies in the midst of all of that, a brand that's not paying and a brand whose employees have told us, well, we aren't treated right. So it really is a reckoning. Well, as we end here, Amber, I'm always a big fan of how do we end on a hopeful note, on a positive note? So curious, just on a personal level, and as you walk into, you know, this weekend, how do you stay hopeful? Or
it's conversations like this, really, that keep me hopeful. It's talking to my friends, my family, and hearing, you know, people that have been commenting on our posts, like, or on our feed. You know, it's the hope of change and seeing it happening right now. There is a lot happening. And I think that is really what keeps me hopeful. And then I know the more I'm learning and the more I'm changing, I'm not the only one, right? So everybody else, you know, if I'm having this conversation with 10 people, that's 10 other people that are changing and growing and being, taking new action. And so that gives me a lot of hope. And then also just the younger generation. I think that they're, you know, from the millennials down to Gen Z, they're just so, they're just very different. They're very different. When I hear my son and my daughters, my stepdaughters, I really hear, you know, they're just so bright. They're so bright, and they really are asking and begging us to do it differently so that they can come into a world that is, you know, that they have opportunity to thrive.
Yeah,
Not
it's beautifully
to get,
said. Yeah. It's for their future, right?
It's their future, yeah.
That we have to do work now for their future. And I'd say, you know,
I was going to ask you, how about you?
Girl from Pakistan, you know, I was telling my husband, I'm like, I'm talking to Amber Valletta. Like, who knew? So this is my fangirl moment.
No, are you kidding? I've been like so excited to talk to you and so like worried and stressed out, and like I'm like, I've got to get this right. This is so important. And you know, what we're talking about is so important. It's about real change. It's about helping people, not charity, but making sure that people are treated fairly and have an opportunity to thrive in their life. And like you said, for the next generation, for their children, for our children. And so for me today, you're excited to talk to me. I'm so excited to talk to you. You're a real hero. And and the women that you help are just, they're in my heart. And I really want to do everything I can to make this a fair and safe and equitable industry.
Thank you. Well, I think for people listening, and that's a wonderful way to end. And, you know, we have these conversations with some of the labor organizer groups, early mornings, late nights, because, you know, time zones. And one of them told me, you know, even with workers hungry right now, they're out protesting on the street, they're demanding their wages, they're emboldened. And so part of what keeps me hopeful is if she hasn't given up, who am I, you know, sitting in the comfort of my home to give up? And the summer is going to get harder, you know, for the women who make our clothes because order volumes are lower than before. You know, a lot of companies are sitting on a lot of excess inventory. And so walking into summer and fall, we just won't have the same volume of production demands. And so making sure that she has severance in her hands, making sure that governments are supporting her, you know, the work ahead of us remains difficult. But in solidarity, we'll do the best we can.
We can do it. We need all of you to go to Remake, sign these petitions, text and tweet your favorite brands, Instagram them, call them out. And your money has power, so put your dollars where it counts. And anything else you want to say, Aisha?
No, I'm just going to say, someone in the comments said, Amber's eyes is so mesmerizing. And I'm like, I agree. It's just to say that be more like Amber, you know. And
be more like Aisha. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And we'll talk privately about more things to do.
Absolutely. We are on it. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
How do I save this? Does anybody know? No. Send me a message, somebody, if anybody knows how to save this. Go live. No. I want to do that. End.